Welcome to A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life. This is the place to be for stories to inspire and uplift when life doesn't go according to our plans. I'm Laura Muirhead, your host and the reigning queen of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life. I can't wait to share the plot twist stories of my guests that will inspire and uplift you when life didn't follow the plan, right here on A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life podcast. Hi, and welcome to this episode of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life. I am so happy to welcome my guest today, Leslie Ellis. She is going to share with us her A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life stories. So welcome, Leslie, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do in the world.
Hi, thanks, Laura. I'm so happy to be here. I just love that name. A funny thing happened on the way to my life. And I'm excited to talk to you. I'm Leslie Ellis, and I am, what I do in the world is I'm a yoga teacher, yoga therapist, and a soul-based coach. I help meaning-seeking humans to help to find their way along this path that is funny constantly, right? I live in Oregon.
Constantly changing, right? Like it's constantly changing for sure. So, and I know you have stories, of course, most of us do, that have really changed your path. And that's kind of what I've been saying lately for whatever reason. What's been coming up is that, you know, we don't go on a straight path in life. It kind of turns this way or that way. And frequently, even as, you know, some of the turns are softer and some of them are maybe a little sharper. So, yeah, right. So, you know, tell us some of what your story is, your funny thing happened on the way to my life experiences.
Well, you know, there just seems so many. And like you said, things are always changing, right? They say the only constant in life is change. And so we have an idea somehow that we're moving in a certain direction. And I've had many of those periods where I'm just trucking along, doing my thing, thinking everything is going well. And then kind of all of a sudden, although when you really think about it, like it's not all of a sudden at all, but in the moment. Like I said, there's many, but there's one huge one that happened not all that long ago, within the last, what's this year? Gosh, it's almost 2022, 6 or 7 years ago, actually, when my husband of 20 years said he wanted a divorce.
That was a little surprising, right?
Like that kind of thing where it's surprising, and yet it's like, it's not. We've been working really hard. I've been working hard, sort of trying to make it work, but also doing my life. And I feel like that's the blessing out of it, that I have a lot of independence already, but still it was a defining moment of having to stop and say, like, okay, I've been married 20 years and now I'm not going to be. Now what happens?
Yeah. And it really, I mean, so many things change with that. You know, did you move, you know, to a new house? Did you, you know, what kind of changes happened along with that? Not just the separation of your marriage and the relationship you've had for 20 years, but, you know, the other things that go along with that. You know, there's so many things that we have to readjust and have a look at and change when those things happened. So tell us what, you know, some of what happened along with, you know, not that wasn't enough. Of course it was, but there's other side effects as well.
Absolutely. One of the things that happened is I had to remember how to be a roommate again. I moved in with a friend. I hadn't had roommates since I was in my 20s, you know, and here I was 50-ish, and I had to have a roommate again. But the other thing that happened is I own a yoga studio, at the time. And that really, in some ways, my poor husband, that really, in some ways, was my primary relationship. Like, I have this very intimate relationship with my business and with the work that I do. I love it so much. Um, and in the process of getting divorced and making all of those changes, I also made the decision to close my yoga studio, which was huge. I remember a woman one time saying to me, this is a random comment, but like, oh yeah, my mom used to own a yoga studio. And I remember thinking at that time, like, what do you mean used to own a yoga studio? Like, how could you do this and like ever let it go? So it's a little bit of a parallel to the marriage. It's like, I have this marriage that I hold so dearly, and that's going to continue. I have this business that I hold so dearly, and that's going to continue. And both of them in the same year dissolved.
Wow. Those were huge changes in your life. And so, along with this, how did you navigate going forward? I mean, here you are, really two of your biggest relationships in your life, and the relationships with, I'm sure, your clients, your yoga clients, your people as well. How did you adjust and change things you're still here. Obviously, we're still here. We're still going forward. So you've made changes and adapted, and tell us a little bit about that as well.
Yeah. The thing that comes immediately to mind is that was a time when a lot of people were mad at me. My ex-husband was mad at me. A lot of my students were mad at me. And not everybody, of course, a lot of people, could hold that I was making the best decision possible. But even the ones that weren't mad, there was disappointment. And I think one of the things that is really clear to me is that I had come to a point where I could hold that, like other people being disappointed, and step into what I really needed. And that made a huge difference in the way that I navigated that. And you say, how do you navigate? It didn't feel like, there were the days, of course, where it felt like tripping over my own feet, trying to figure out where I was going. And also, I feel like, in a way, having all of that, to let go of all of that at the same time, that I had to lean back into trusting myself more.
Right.
Unlike everybody, I have my challenges on those days. It's like, that's one of the funny things I think about this. A funny thing happened on the way to my life. I realized that I could really trust myself.
Yeah. And that's huge. I mean, that's so important. And I'm just curious, like, just going back to this a minute. So your divorced was the first thing, right? And then as you went along, is it something you could share? Like, how did you decide that, well, the yoga studio should close as well? Like, this is your business, this is your livelihood. Like, to make that change, how did you end up making that decision?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, of course, there were many, many things that went into that. It was a lot to hold for one person at this studio, and there were a lot of people who were relying on me. I was working so hard, and I think that making that other shift in my life and feeling, it's like, in a way, it complicated everything, but it also really simplified things. It was just me now. I didn't have this marriage relationship that was something that I had to sort of figure out how to hold together or participate in even. It was just me. And I felt this very, very strong pull to simplify. So that was a big part of closing the studio. It's like, I like need space. And then the way the studio was a lot bigger than the business I have, you could think it was more spacious, but it was so encompassing. And so I needed like my own space. And it came together really naturally. It wasn't something that I was really looking for. It's just, I'd kind of thought about it. And then I met with a friend who wanted to talk to me about yoga, and she had space in her wellness center, a little movement studio that I could just rent just for me instead of this big storefront that I had, and I could do my work there. And it felt so good when we had that conversation. The decision was just, I mean, it was heart wrenching, but it also was kind of happened. And it was so good. It was so good. Yeah.
I think that's really interesting and a good and such a good message, because clearly it was the right thing, you know, even though it was huge. When you feel that, you know, when you just feel that intuition almost, and that it feels right in your body, and this and to have the next opportunity come along like that, where if you probably wouldn't have maybe closed your studio had you not had an alternative with this smaller space. And like you said, to simplify and to not have really be running everything. I mean, there's a lot, I imagine, like most businesses, there's a lot to running a big studio, you know, keeping all the appointments and the classes and the books. And so for you, like you said, to simplify and to go into this, you know, smaller space, but still be able to continue what your heart, you know, loves to do. That's incredible that opportunity, you know, opened up. And I think sometimes when we do take that first step, you know, the next step does maybe come up, you know, the opportunity does come up. And I think that's incredible for you that that's what happened.
Yeah. 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 When you take this step, the next step comes up. I'm just sort of letting that bounce around inside my brain because it feels good, right? We don't always, it's sort of like that self-trust. You can trust that you know what to do. And I think over and over that gets demonstrated when we're paying attention.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy. I mean, sometimes it feels like stepping off a cliff. And at the same time, that next step will come up. I just had this image of, I don't know, like the coyote and Roadrunner, like stepping off the cliff, but then instead of falling all the way to the bottom, the ground comes up to meet him. Like we could have that happen, right?
Right. And I think that has to do with self-trust, like you're saying. It, you know, what felt good for you at that time, you know, with even with all these people, you know, mad at you, you know, don't close. We love your studio. I'm sure this was it, right? I've had a business in the past that I closed, and it was the same thing where people are like, "How could you? How dare you?" And part of you goes, "Well, what do you mean? Like you're not here running it. Like I'm glad you love it and you benefit from it, but this is a decision that you know maybe has multiple layers that you don't understand, you know, the people, your customers don't necessarily understand. And but at the same time, I would imagine the people who really wanted to still work with you had that opportunity in this smaller space.
Yeah, yeah, we are able to continue those relationships and they actually become even more intimate because so maybe that's another thing. I don't know that I've ever thought of it exactly like this, but like with a marriage falling apart, that sort of intimate relationship dissolved. My business, that intimate relationship dissolved, but that didn't mean that intimacy was gone out of my life. It meant that it could take a different shape and a different form, and that I could really establish new relationships or deepen old relationships from that space that I created by kind of letting go of these structures that were, you know, in a way, fully self created, but also dictating what at least I felt like I needed to do and what the next step was. And when those fell away, then it was more, okay, now I can do this thing that I want to. Now I can respond more to what life is putting up in front of me. Now I had no idea, like 2 years ago, that this is what it was going to look like. But hey, it's kind of cool. It's kind of interesting over there. I could get curious and like see what was possible.
And really, like you said, honor yourself and what you want. And I think that that's part of it too. When you think about, marriages, as we go along, really, we tend to go along and go forward. And sometimes I think in a lot of relationships, I'm thinking of, some of the relationships that I've had where you don't necessarily realize you just are, this is what we did, this is the decision we made, and maybe you don't even realize or think, am I happy or I'm not happy? You kind of get caught up in the flow, I guess, if you will, of even like a river. I'm picturing like a river flowing, and you just kind of swept along with the current of the river, because this is the decision you made, and of course we're going along. And possibly even with your business, this is the decision you made, and this is what you do. You get up and you go to the studio, you get up and you go, you get up and you do your class, and don't even realize until a funny thing happens on the way to your life that goes, oh, wait, let me have another look at things. And I love that you're talking about the self-trust, and it opened up this opportunity for you to just sit back. I don't want to say sit back, but take a maybe step back and say, okay, this is on me now. What am I going to do going forward? What feels good to me? And honoring that for yourself. I think that's the biggest thing, is to honor what feels good for you going forward. And like you say, I love this idea of the intimacy that fell away, but the new intimacy that you were able to create and deepen with your students and your clients. And I think that's so beautiful.
Thank
And
you.
I think sometimes until we look back, we go, oh, okay, maybe there were some signs that you didn't see, that we don't notice as we go along. And then to look back and go, oh, this does feel good. This does, maybe even the smaller space feels more expansive at this point.
Exactly. Right. Like something new could come in. Yeah. And one of the things I think about, again, it's like this little, somebody said at some point about the divorce. Oh, I'm sorry. So many people said this actually. Oh, I'm sorry it didn't work out. Or one person said to me, oh, I always thought you guys were such a perfect couple. It's surprising me, that you're split up. And then similar with the studio, like, oh, why are you closing? Like, how come it's not working anymore? And I think there's that sense in our culture of like, if you change your direction, that you've failed somehow. And neither of those ever felt like a failure to me. It really felt like, a hard left turn, like you were saying, like, or sometimes it could even feel like turning around, going back the other way for a little while. But I think that's just an important thing that people can consider. Like when I change my mind or change my direction, something looks completely different than it did 6 months ago or a year ago. I never would have envisioned this happening. If we approach it like it's a failure, then it's hard to let that path open up in front, because we're going to be looking back in reflection or looking back in regret. And instead, it's like, no, it's just a funny thing happened on the way to my life. And now I'm doing this. And what is out there? Yeah.
I think that's an important point, that it's not necessarily a failure. For 20 years, it wasn't a failure.
Exactly.
It's not a failure. Or to say even, I'm sorry it didn't work out. It worked out for 20 years.
That's exactly what I said over and over. Like, no, it did work. It worked great. It worked really great until one day it was like, something else needs to work.
Yeah, it's not working now. So, and that's exactly it. We're allowed to change our minds. And one of the things that I've thought, I'm multi-passionate and I've done different things in my life. I've had, I've had a bread store. I've had a horse stable. Now I have an art studio. And sometimes I take a step back and think, for the people who've known me over time, do they think, oh, for heaven's sakes, couldn't you just have a hobby? Like, does everything have to be a business? But for whatever reason, they have been. And for whatever reason, my passion has led me in these different directions. And it is a change of mind, or it is a change of course. And things, like we said at the beginning, things don't change is the one constant. And when things do change in your life, and it's okay to change your mind. Like, you're right. There's a societal thing that seems to be like, oh, she's just flaky. She can't make up her mind. Okay, I can make up my mind. You can make up your mind. It's just that your mind has changed. Another thing has come into your awareness that you're like, ooh, that might be fun. Let's try that. Ooh, I like that more than I thought I would. So I'd like some more space to do that, or whatever it is. And yeah, you're clearly your yoga studio wasn't a failure either. It wasn't a failure. It just changed from a big space to a smaller space. It just changed. You're still doing it, right?
Well, now I'm doing it in my little office. I actually live in a different city now. I mean, it opened up a lot of other things because I moved to a different town. I now work out of my home. I'm in my little office right now. My desk, there's my yoga mat over there. There's my camera where I do all my Zoom classes. Actually, I teach meditation from right here, just like this. And like when I was standing in the middle of my yoga studio 10 years ago, I would never have imagined, like, okay, this big expansive space is going to be this little 12 by 14 room. Right. And a camera, that I'm teaching into. But
go ahead.
Oh, just who knew we were going to have a pandemic, right?
So there's that too, but
it happened on the way to all of our lives.
Well, and that's the thing. If we any of us, I think, say, 5 or 10 years ago, if I would have thought that I'd be here, no, like for most of us, no, we can't imagine. And to look back, and part of it is how the outside world changes, how technology changes, how, right, in 1980 we wouldn't be talking, we wouldn't be here, right? So this is the thing. And as technology changes, or as the world changes, and how awesome is it that you can have your camera and you do your Zoom classes and touch people. This is one of the things that I am so grateful for, because I know that you and I met virtually through some Facebook groups, and our common denominator with like a lot of my guests and a lot of the people I know now is Joanna Hunter. Right. And if it weren't for her, but I wouldn't even know her if it wasn't for technology. So I am so grateful for that. And I was even telling my husband this morning, because I've had so many virtual friends who have done, Zoom workshops for me or different things. And I love this connection, and the virtual friends who feel like they're not virtual, feel just like friends. So I'm super grateful for technology and change, and the things that the ways we are able to connect. And I love this idea that, okay, so if we sat here and said, where will we be in 5 years? Who knows, right? Right. But the opportunities, incredible opportunities, are there, and it'll be fun in 5 years to say, oh, here we were talking, and where were we? But that's it. I love that, and like I said, we adjust. Hopefully, most of us adjust to the outer changes as well, and take advantage of the opportunities that come up. And I would think for you, this is a great, it seems like a perfect space for you at this time in your life, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It is a perfect space for me. And one thing that you just said is, again, it's a little spark in the mind. But you said hopefully we respond to the changes that are happening outside, and and I'm interpreting from that, like that we stay open to those and allow them to have an impact on us and where we're going. And then also to stay open to those changes on the inside, because I think sometimes we sort of, I feel like I'm the same old person that I've always been. And I'm so incredibly different than I was, even yesterday. And so staying really awake to what it is that's going on and what are those impulses inside that are coming forward and what is it that I want. And that's one of the things that I really try to encourage in my clients is to like look at that, like not just responding to what's happening outside, everybody else's expectations, cultural norms and all of that, like to allow yourself to like just be uniquely who you are and all of that vitality, whatever it is that's inside that's wanting to take form, to be open to that too. So.
And I think along with that, as you're talking, I'm thinking that maybe that you are the change, just your small accepting of whatever the things are that you want, that you are maybe changing, maybe not the whole world, like that's a big undertaking, but your ripple effect in the world, like you're changing. I can say the same thing. I feel like, yes, of course, I'm the same person. This is the same human body that I've had all my life, right? Obviously. I'm not the same. And through the changes and the willingness to learn and the willingness to grow and the willingness to change and the spark, like you said, the inner spark of, oh, that sounds interesting. Let me go down that way a little bit and learn more about that. And maybe you get part way and go, nah, that really wasn't for me so much, but maybe that opens another door and another opportunity. And like you say, yeah, not necessarily conforming, to the outer world, but honoring what the changes that you want to make inside and going with those things and allowing, when you see an opportunity that really does light a spark inside you, that you say, yeah, let me pursue that a little more.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's great that that's one of the things that you encourage in your coaching. That's incredible.
Yeah. I think people need it. I know I do. I need that from my coaches and from the people who support me, the community that I bring around me that's going to help. And so one of my intentions is that part of that little ripple that I make has that impact on you and on the other people that come into that circle and are touched by that. And we're all, all of our ripples are impacting each other, and it creates this beautiful current that we get to ride here in this life.
Right. I love that. That's incredible. That's a great analogy and I love it. So when in your coaching, do you merge your yoga practices with coaching? Are they a little bit separate? What kind of coaching do you offer?
I'm a certified soul-based coach. So it's a very specific technique that's intended not to be like problem solving or me coaching you like, oh, you should do this or you should do that for this problem that you have. It's very much focused on your desires, what it is that you want to have happen, and then exploring that in the language of what we could call it, your inner language, the language of your intuition, the language of your soul, which often isn't words and ideas and, a to-do list, but more metaphor and image and those kinds of things that inform us in a way that help us to feel what it is that we want. So that's the coaching. And yeah, in my private sessions with people, I do a combination. Sometimes it's more specific, one or the other, depending on what someone's needing. But often there's kind of a weaving of the two. They're both very embodied practices. And what I find is the coaching can help you really connect to what it is that your own system really knows for you. And then with the yoga, we can kind of help anchor that in the body and give you like tangible practices that you can do to help sort of support that journey for yourself. And then even in my group classes and group work, there's a combination. So I do a little bit of soul-based coaching as meditation sometimes, even in a group setting. So.
It sounds amazing, and it does sound like a really good combination because it is all connecting with yourself, really, like whether it's your inner desires or your body movement and the flow of, but it's all sounds like to me, the flow of the energy and how you can connect with yourself in a better way on both of those levels, on the soul-based level and your physical level.
Yeah. Yeah. And yoga really, I mean, one of the, I think about it, the like primary purposes of yoga is self-knowing, both the self-knowing of like your individual self who's here, like walking around on the world, but your self-knowing too, as a part of the universe, the part of the bigger whole, that self-knowing. And the soul-based coaching, again, it's another way in to that understanding of who you are, of what it is that you want. I think that's a question that we don't get to entertain as much as we really should. Like, what do you want? What do you want to have happen? We think about what I'm supposed to do or what I think I need or what I want, but what I want can be really kind of veiled or clouded by all of these other ideas and, messages and perspectives from the other. And so taking that moment to say, no, like, what do I really want? And what does that even mean?
And I think that's really interesting too, because I would imagine a lot of times if you ask someone, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
They don't know. People don't know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and then, so that's where, and a lot of times I think we're not very patient with ourselves about that. It's like, well, what do I want? Well, I don't know, so I'll just try this, or I'll just try that, or well, somebody else said this was good, so I'll do that, right? But it takes some patience. It sometimes takes some time, and also that quality of self-trust, because I think that we self-edit a lot too. What do I want? And like the little rising that comes up from the heart, and we'll immediately go like, oh, I'm not supposed to want that. No, not, that's not what this question is about, right? If we just let that trickle up and explore it, sometimes it makes a lot of sense. Most of the time, it makes a lot of sense. Like it can actually develop into something that you really, it's like the perfect thing, even though you couldn't see it before.
Well, and I agree with you, like with the self-editing, I think, and somewhat because of maybe pressure from outside influences, where if you were to say, I want to do this, or I want to do this other thing, people might, you as an individual might think, oh, no, because so-and-so will think that's silly. They'll think I'm being selfish, or they'll think I'm spending my money, or whatever it is. I don't even want to give examples because there's so many that could come up. But I also think along those lines that there's so many people that if they could tell you what they don't want. They could give you a long list of what they don't want. but the do want, and I do agree with you that I think a lot of times we hold ourselves back from allowing what we do want because of whatever it is, whatever somebody else will say or think, or how that'll look to the outside world, that we're being frivolous, or we're being, again, selfish, or whatever it is. And but there isn't, we have to be selfish and honor ourselves.
Yeah. Well, and we want so badly to be understood too. And I think that sometimes, I know that I've seen it in myself, that I will step back from something that I really want, that I want to do, because you might not understand it. And then you might have a judgment about me about that. And so part of the process is sort of dismantling that too, that I expect that you're going to understand, and that I wouldn't do something because you don't understand. I mean, if you kind of look at it like that, it's sort of ridiculous, right? We just met.
Right.
But that kind of thing does hold us back. Yeah. The judgment, fear of judgment from other people, but that often really points to judgment that we have, that we're placing on ourselves. Yeah.
I think a lot of times I'm just thinking of things, as we change, and maybe you have friends or family that have known you, all your life, who have seen you do these different things, and have you, well, at least in your own mind, you think they think whatever they think of you, or whatever their vision of you is. And if you go on in this other direction, that those are the people that are going to be, what are you doing? You're not a, whatever it is, you're not an artist. You're not a yoga teacher. You're not a coach. What are you doing coaching all of a sudden? What do you mean you're doing this? What do you mean you're moving to another town? Now, you've lived here all your life. Why are you moving? So these things that hold us in place when we have desires to do other things. And really, it comes back to the self-trust and being, so at some level saying, I have to make myself happy. And you're going to have whatever. What's the quote? Whatever someone else thinks of you is none of your business. Right. I know I'm not saying that right, but paraphrasing it, it's not. Yeah, whatever they think of you is none of your business. You have to make yourself happy. That's the whole point, right?
For sure. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you that the people who've known me all of my life, what they think of me is I'm weird. I actually remember as a kid, I used to watch Lilias Folan. She was one of the first people in doing yoga on TV, like in the 70s. And I used to watch her in secret because my family would not approve of that kind of TV viewing, watching yoga. Anyway, and I don't think anybody thinks that it's bad that I'm doing yoga, but they definitely, I'm the odd duck. So I think part of being happy too is allowing yourself to be your own unique odd duck, and, walk your own weird way, and just do it in a way that pleases you. That's one of my mantras, I think. Well, what would please me? Because I'm never going to please everybody else. The only one that I can really know what to do in order to please is me. So why not do that and see what happens?
Yeah, that's such a great message. And yeah, I imagine back in the 70s that the yoga wasn't the mainstream accepted thing, especially to watch on TV. That it definitely has come into its much larger understanding and acceptance. But even at that, I think now sometimes people question it. But yeah, you can only please yourself. There's so many people in the world, and who are you gonna? And let's go back to your marriage again. Even in that, even if you thought you were pleasing yourself and your husband, apparently, and I'm not saying that it was your responsibility to make him happy. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying in that relationship, and for him to say, listen, I'm not happy anymore. Yeah, there's some level of, you could have stayed in that relationship and both not been the happiest.
Right.
but you both know, let's choose to go our separate ways, and hopefully we both can be happier in life. And that's it. Like, that's the message, is to be happy and make ourselves happy. And then again, once, I think a lot of people are finding that when you do make yourself happy, then it affects other people around you in such a good way. And then they see it, and then you just attract such a better whatever client and friends, and everything just works when you're happy. When you're not happy, I mean, people don't necessarily want to be around you unless maybe they're miserable, and you can be miserable together. I don't know. But yeah, I love this message that you have of, just if you're weird. I mean, I don't know. On some level, I'm thinking about this. Like, if you were considered the weird one all your life, is that almost freeing to be like, well, if I'm already weird, what's the difference? I can just continue to be weird, and no one will be surprised by that. So whatever I do is great.
Oh, there she goes again. All right, this is expected, right? Yeah.
Well, just be weird. Just be your weird self. It's all good. Love that.
Yeah.
And so, how long have you been in this house and in your space, creating in your own little? I don't want to say little, even, creating this in your own space. Has it been a few years now?
Yeah. After I closed my studio, I moved into that smaller studio, which was in the same area of town. And then I closed that space and moved here. I live in Bend, Oregon now, which is in the high desert of Oregon. It's really beautiful. And I took a sabbatical. Actually, just took some time off for a while. And then when I came out of that sabbatical, I was seeing some of my old clients I used to live in the Portland, Oregon area. So I was seeing clients from Portland online, and just kind of working in that way. And just starting to get out and meet some more people. And I had a yoga studio that I started doing a little bit of work out of, not teaching on their schedule, but seeing some private clients and doing some workshops and things like that. But really feeling like I really love working online. Like, that is what I love to do. And I think part of it is because it opens up such a beautiful channel for meeting people that I wouldn't meet otherwise. And there's so many ways to connect with people, whether somebody becomes my client or not. There's just online so many ways that we can connect. We can get to know each other. We can inspire each other. We can have meaningful conversations. And so I was doing that. And then I guess that for about 3 years, kind of working in that way. And then we had COVID, the pandemic, which actually, it's been all of the things, really challenging, all of those things, because I was already working from home and like mostly just hanging out here in my little space, not a huge impact on kind of my day-to-day activities, except it's like this gate opened to working online, and I started seeing more clients and working in groups online. And so now I have a really sweet program that I just love running with a number of people. And another little funny thing that happened, like a gate opened that brought more interaction and community and joy into my life because I was connecting with even more people. And I know that's not everybody's situation. A lot of people felt like their lives really restricted. I feel like there was this opening, this blossoming really to being able to interact with and impact more people, because we have this beautiful technology, as we were talking about before.
Yeah, I love that too. That it was just another a funny thing happened on the way to your life. Oh, here's another opening. Do I walk through it? Yeah, let me walk through it. And I know there are people that we know in some of the groups that we're in on Facebook that do have collaborated business wise together. Now there's so many changes, and like you said, so many opportunities that you can have virtual coffee meetups and work with people, working groups that you can do. There are so many, and I love that it affected you in such a positive way and opened up so much space for you and for you to touch more people as well, to touch these people's lives and to bring your programs and your yoga and what you have to offer, your soul-based coaching and all these things to touch people's lives. That's incredible. It's so good. Your ripple grew larger over the past year and a half, right? And so that's beautiful.
Yeah, it grew larger, and I got even more pleased.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. And like I said, I mean, you can connect with people all over the world, really. There's so many people that I follow that in different countries, and that I feel like they're they're my friends, and you can send them a little package, a little thank you or whatever, and you still connect to them in a physical way that way, but also just have these relationships, and it's so beautiful. And there's so many lovely people that are willing. I in my art studio in Michigan, last year I started doing workshops, and we hold in-person workshops, but it could be someone like you who does the workshop. So again, through the technology, you're my teacher for the day, my guest mentor for the day. And I've had everybody that I've had all of them last year, people from the UK, and I have only had actually one person from the States doing that. Wow. And it's so beautiful to be able to bring things in to introduce to people that they potentially would never be able to know about, or maybe they've heard of it. I'm not saying they wouldn't know, they don't have the opportunity to know, but to learn from these people who are very good at what they do and very knowledgeable, and to introduce them to things. And that's same as you can touch all these incredible people all over the world. And what an opportunity. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. It's amazing what we have. Two of my main mentors, one's in the UK and one in the Netherlands. And I met them because we're online,
Right.
And that's, I don't know if I'll ever get to actually meet them in person, but I feel very close with them anyway. Yeah. And then many, many friends too that, I've only sat across from them with a screen between us. But there's an amazing amount of Shakti, or amazing amount of life force energy that can actually flow and move even when we meet in this realm. It works because of the way energy works, I guess, and it's like, you're still there. I'm right here. And in this space and time right now, we're together. And the cool thing is that anybody who watches the recording, like, this is one of the things that I love about the sort of Zoom world, Laura, that I don't know if I would have anticipated it exactly like this. Because I used to watch recordings of things, but I hadn't thought about it as much. But I've thought about it a lot because I teach online, and people sometimes watch recordings. And a lot of people say, well, it's just not the same as if I'm actually there with you. And there is an element of truth to that. But also, even on a recording, you can really sort of sink into the energy of it and receive it and participate. So it's just another realm. Like, we can be in real time together, but we can also be in like alternate time together and still really benefit from the connection.
Yeah, and I think that I so agree with that, because I guess into talking about an energy is that your energy still is going to come across. If it's a recording of you, let's say it's a record, well, this recording or any recording, but a recording of you offering whatever you offer, your energy, your presence is still there in that recording or in that space. And I love that. And I feel that sometimes, I'll say that what you said is that, if I didn't catch someone on their live, Facebook or whatever, I don't feel the same when I listen to them back, but I do. You're not able on a Facebook recording, you're not able to interact with them in that moment, but you can still get their energy. You can still get the information. You can still absorb that. And maybe sometimes even in a better way, because you can pause it and, and think about it and wait, I'm distracted. You're not distracted in this moment. You're not distracted. If you're distracted by watching someone, you can pause it when you watch it on a replay, and if that distraction comes in, then you can go back to it and so absolutely, yeah, that is incredible. And you said the time, it's kind of mind-blowing to think about the energy and the time and the space, and like you were talking about. But
have a whole nother funny thing happened conversation about all of that, right?
A whole different metaphysical level of a funny thing happened on the way to my life. We're going to have to go deeper on that. I'm not ready for that one yet at all.
Okay.
I'd have to spend some more time with you on that to get to that, to get to that level. Oh, that's incredible. Yeah. The universal aspect of that, right? So, well, I think this is a beautiful place to wrap up our conversation, but I'm so thankful, so grateful for you to join me. I want to, before we wrap up, would love for you to share, and I'll share in the show notes as well, where people can find you online and how they can reach out to you and connect with you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Well, I am on Facebook. My business name there is Heart Song Yoga and Coaching with Leslie Ellis. And I do have a Facebook group that is really sweet, that I share yoga and thoughts and meditations and all those kinds of things. And then I'm right in the midst, actually, of building a new website. So if you go to my website, which is yogaheartsong.com, you'll see my old website, which it could be a whole nother funny thing happen story. But I started building a new website, and my old website suddenly just started breaking. It's like falling apart. If you go there, you could see it dissolving probably in front of your eyes. Really incredible. Just kind of letting it happen. But the new website actually should be live in the next week or two. And so
it sort of gave you that push, that push you needed to redo your website.
Or confirmation, like you're on the right track, Leslie.
That's incredible that it's dissolving. No, thank you for sharing, and thank you so much again. I'm so grateful. I love your story. Thank you, Laura, for willing to share your incredible story with us. And I know people are going to want to reach out to you and find you online. And thank you to our listeners who were here.
Thank you.
Online as well, in whatever space you're in, listening to this. Thank you. We're so grateful.
All right. Take care.
Thank you for listening to A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Life podcast. For more information, visit my website at www.lauramuirhead.com.